A very good morning. This is webinar. We are here today for a webinar titled the Indo-Pacific and Southeast Asia Strategic Contest and Rivalry in Technology Adoption. This webinar is being in cooperation with His Excellency, the Ambassador of Japan, His Excellency Takahashi Katsuhiko, to deliver the opening remarks. And as I was just discussing with the Ambassador, he has been in Malaysia just slightly over a year now, 1 year and 5 days, I think, to be exact. With that, Your Excellency, I yield the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas Daniel, Senior Fellow, Institute of Strategic International Studies, or ISIS Malaysia, Mr. Farina Said, Senior Analyst, ISIS Malaysia, Dr. Dai Mochinaga, Associate Professor, Shibara Institute of Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am pleased to have the opportunity to deliver the opening remarks at a very timely online seminar this morning. As most of you have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, the cyberspace expands our horizon and brings more convenience to people's lives. On the other hand, we are facing increasing security risks to our economy and society from cyber attacks as we become more widely connected. Cyberspace is a place of competition between states that reflect geopolitical tensions even in ordinary times. As Dr. Mochinaga will later address, exporting digital infrastructure and providing technology can also expand the influence of the exporting country. Furthermore, the threat of sophisticated cyber attacks, including those in which state involvement is suspected, has increased in an organized and carefully prepared manner, and the situation cannot be described as peacetime at all. It is not easy for a single country to respond to such threats alone. Therefore, cooperation with relevant countries play a pivotal role. I would also like to underscore the importance for actual cyberspace to be free, fair, and secure in order for it to continue to generate innovation and prosperity in the future. In order to maintain such a situation, a rule-based international order is indispensable. Ladies and gentlemen, now let me highlight Japan's cybersecurity policy to overcome those challenges I have just described. Amid the differences in fundamental values concerning cyberspace, and emerging conflicts over international rules and regulations, it is important to realize a free, fair, and secure cyberspace. To this end, Japan is working on 4 pillars. First, promotion of the rule of law. Second, efforts to deter cyber attacks. Third, promotion of confidence-building measures. And fourth, support for capacity building. Regional and bilateral cooperation is also a key element of Japan's cyber policies. Given the borderless nature of cyberspace, capacity building of the Southeast Asian countries is important for stabilizing cyberspace and security environment in the world as a whole. One example is at the ASEAN Regional Forum, or ARF, in which ASEAN, the United States, Australia, the European Union, and other countries participate. In this ARF, Japan served as co-chair of ARF intersessional meeting on ICT security, together with Malaysia and Singapore until August last year, and we discussed views on the cybersecurity environment, efforts by each country, and confidence-building measures based on discussions by the international community, including the United Nations. Japan also continues to provide capacity building support in the field of cybersecurity to other countries with special focus on ASEAN countries. For example, the Japan-ASEAN Integration Fund has established the ASEAN-Japan Cybersecurity Capacity Building Center in 2017 and conducted cybersecurity exercise since then. We also implement projects related to cybersecurity together with the participating country of Quad. They are Japan, the United States, Australia, and India. Ladies and gentlemen, Japan will continue to contribute to the realization of a free, fair, and secure cyberspace. We hope that Dr. Mochinaga's deeply insightful lecture today will help us to realize our goal in Southeast Asia. I conclude my remarks by thanking ISIS once again for organizing this online seminar, and I hope everybody to enjoy today's program. Thank you very much. ありがとうございます。Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for your remarks. And I do note an emphasis on the 4 pillars, which I hope that maybe Dr. Mochinga or my colleague Farlina will be able to touch on later. But in any case, let us move on now to the main remarks. But before that, please allow me to lay out some ground rules for everyone. Firstly, this webinar will continue until 11:15 Kuala Lumpur time. So we have about an hour from now. The first speaker will be Dr. Dai Mochinga. Dr. Mochinga is an associate professor with the Shibura Institute of Technology. I believe he will be speaking for about 20 minutes, from which then my colleague Farlina will jump in as a discussant and a respondent. Dr. Mochinga, it is my pleasure to invite you to take the floor to deliver your remarks. It's yours, sir.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for my introduction. My name is Dai Mochinага from Shibura Institute of Technology. So I'd like to share my slide. I'd like to talk today about the overview of the cybersecurity incident impacts in the global situation, especially in the recent Japanese incident and how it impacts on the healthcare sector. The second topic is how Japan is approaching to the Indo-Pacific region in the field of the cybersecurity. Especially, Japan has engaged for a long time in Southeast Asia region for the capacity building or the infrastructure development, and also recently, as Ambassador Takahashi said, we are now conducting the more norm discussion or more rulemaking in the area. And the third one is I'd like to touch on China's Digital Silk Road Initiative, which is the part of the Belt and Road Initiative. But I'd like to talk about how the China is expanding its influence by utilizing the technologies. The fourth point is economic development. Economic development and data. Data is playing an important role in economic development recently, because as a keyword of the digital economy. So we have to promote the how sharing the data or transferring the data to promote the economic development. But there is a curious situation happening in this area, because in the Southeast Asia region, there are so many fragmented situations happening in the region, because some countries trying to regulate that transferring the data, or setting up the data localization regulations. So we have to think about the situation and how can we secure interoperability of the information technology systems. That is a key to the economic development and data. The last point is a principal ICT implementation into our society. These, my talking is mainly for taking to the cybersecurity aspect, but the principal ICT implementation is more a broader topic for the recent development on the ICT sector. So I'd like to what type of principles we can set, or what types of behavior we cannot accept is very very important topic for in promoting cybersecurity. The first one is the overview of cybersecurity incidents and impacts. So there are so many impacts by the ransomware is happening in global worldwide. Ransomware, it threatens the victim to block access to the data of computers and to publish it. This tactic is called double extortion. The first extortion is blocking access to data by encryption. The second extortion is threatening to disclose stolen data to the public. If computers infect ransomware, it disrupts government and private sector operations. These types of ransomware operated by ransomware actors, which are developing and distributing ransomware worldwide. So that kind of issues not only is categorized as a cyber criminal, but also national security issues. So the Japanese government and other governments are trying to protect information systems from these disrupting by ransomware. The U.S. government sanctioned cyber criminal groups is called Lockbit 2.0, which operating a ransomware. These types of cyber criminals carefully selected targets, investigating computer configurations by investigating configurations. For example, this Lockbit 2.0 does not attack computers configured to use Eastern European languages. So they are off the target from these types of computers and target other computers. This kind of mechanism works well fine, and victims of the ransomware is mainly in the Japan and other Western Europe and the Southeast Asian countries. So we have to take care of these types of threats and prevent becoming the victims. So recent cyber security incident is focusing on the data. Because of the data is a primary target of the cyber attacks. A hospital in Japan was hit by a ransomware attack in June, and it shows the data security is critical for its operation. And in that case, electromedical records of around 85,000 patients become inaccessible. So the hospital received a threat saying that it will have to pay the ransom if they do not want the data to be released. The hospital released to pay the money and was forced to stop accepting new patients. It takes about 2 months of recovery, and after the recovery, the hospital released a document regarding the result of the investigation. The hospital says that they did not apply the computer security update properly, and while the other organizations have spread the warnings. Another case, another case of the criticality of protecting the data is shown in the Russian invasion to Ukraine. The Russian invasion to Ukraine showed how can the protecting the data is directly connected to how the life of the people. Before the invasion, Microsoft and other cybersecurity companies found malware in multiple critical information systems and the government systems. The malware called Whispergate wiper malware, which permanently delete the data on infected computers. and after the discovery, Microsoft released update on January to implement protections detecting this malware family. So the discovery and the removal of the malware from the critical information infrastructure before the invasion supported the escape of Ukrainian people. In just the first 10 days, the Russian invasion, nearly 1 million Ukrainian civilians escaped to the safety on rail network. If the malware had remained undiscovered, infected systems, it could not work properly and the situation became worse. So next, I would like to explore about the Japan's engagement in the Pacific region. Japan, as I said, Japan has engaged for a long time in this region in the area of the capacity building and infrastructure development and rural confidence building. For example, capacity building, the right side picture shows the just before the COVID. It's a February 2020's picture, inviting the people from Southeast Asian countries, cybersecurity professionals to Japan at the JP-CC office. JP-CC is Japan's Computer Emergency Response Team central body of the Japanese civilian organization which coordinates cybersecurity incidents and gave the training for them to how can they handle the cybersecurity incident. And at that time it held in Japan, but the JP-CC has provided training in the Pacific region since I think it's the 1990s, and then expanding to the broader communities. And also, as Ambassador Takahashi said, Japan has conducted a cyber exercise since with ASEAN, and also Japan is engaged in the infrastructure development from the viewpoint of the cybersecurity. Japan and ASEAN countries cooperating with the threat monitoring on the telecommunication or internet infrastructure. And also, Japan is now invested to the submarine cable development, and it connects to the institution in the Pacific region and countries. And the last point of rules and confidence building is the more important point in this decade, because the now new rules is coming to the cybersecurity area. For example, data protection. Japan's engagement has a principle of ensuring a free and fair and secure cyberspace, since it declared in Japan's first cybersecurity strategy of 2014. Its international cooperation has specific items of sharing expertise or collaboration on the capacity building. These types of engagement have the consistent with the free open Indo-Pacific. The free open Indo-Pacific is a vision shaping. This is a vision shaping Japan's international strategy. It promotes rule-based order, economic prosperity, and security. So Japan's cyber diplomacy follows these three pillars in promoting the rule of law in cyberspace and developing confidence-building measures and cooperation on the capacity building. The first pillar promoting the rule of law implemented in the agendas of bilateral and multilateral meetings. Its contribution to the multilateral meetings is not only the United Nations groups of governance experts discussions or open-ended working group discussions, but also the ASEAN Regional Forum and conferences discussing cyber norms. For example, Japan, as Ambassador introduced, ARF is one of the important important engagement for Japan. And at that, ARF members contribute. At that point, ARF members contribute to the international discussions regarding cybersecurity. So I think the Japan and ASEAN successfully formulated a collective action influencing to the cyber knowledge discussions. Another characteristics of the integration, this is integration of ongoing initiatives in line with the second pillar, economic prosperity. Japan has contributed to infrastructure development, not only cyber, but also other type of seaports or road or railways, or these types of infrastructures Japan has long engaged in these types of developing these types of infrastructure. So in cyber, network connectivity contributes to the pursuit of economic prosperity. So as I said, the subsea cable project connects institutions in countries throughout the region and promotes its collaboration. These initiatives have been carried by the Ministry of Internal Affairs Communication of Japan, and since 2015, it's before the Free Open Indo-Pacific release. So the Free Open Indo-Pacific works as a glue of these kind of engagements. The last point of security, capacity building is contributes to the security. Japan has contributed to the cyber capacity development for over at least 20 years, and it has shared best practices and threat information within national computer emergency response teams. And also these teams gathered in the community such as Meridian or First. Its community-based approach leads to the collective power and confidence building. In operational level, it has contributed the capacity building of the computer emergency response team in the Indo-Pacific region. JP CERT CC has provided training to the computer emergency response teams in the region, and led AP CERT. It is another organizations gathering of the computer emergency response team, and as a steering committee member. In governmental level, since 2009, Japan and ASEAN have Director General and Director level meetings on cybersecurity. And Japan conducted a cyber capacity building by deepening understanding and training. As the ambassador said, ASEAN-Japan Cybersecurity Capacity Building Center in Bangkok, and the center provides a training of malware analysis and forensics with support of the Japanese companies such as NAC or LAC. So I'd like to moving on to the next topic, Digital Silk Road. And Digital Silk Road is China's. Why I talking this topic is the next decades or last decades, China's movement is very, very big in this region. So I'd like to introduce as how we create the rules and how to create a common understanding is a key to secure cyberspace in next decades. So I'd like to introduce China's engagement in the region. The Digital Silk Road is a part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, and this is China's international strategy with information and communication technologies. It provides the infrastructure or smart cities or payment platform or something like that. So there is so many huge maps in this initiative. Its goal, or goal of the Digital Silk Road is strengthening China's national power. To achieve this goal, Chinese government and its industries are promoting projects pursuing economic growth, military modernization, or shaping global rules. It tools a wide variety of products and services with information and communication technologies. China leverages technologies to make other countries dependent on Chinese economy and technology, such as infrastructure, mobile payment platforms, or social medias through Digital Silk Road. So I'd like to point out that earning return through digital Silk Road can be explained by the concept of the dual circulation. This is the key of the digital Silk Road for China. The Chinese Communist Party released the concept of the dual circulation in 2020. The dual circulation describes the interaction of the domestic and overseas ecosystems. It underpins its economic strategy, aiming to boost the innovation of its industries and make them more competitive globally. It also strengthens Beijing's influence on other states by increasing dependency to the Chinese technologies and economy. There are 3 stages in dual circulation: increase dependency and get returns. The first stage is domestic circulation. The government supports technology development and protected industries with regulation and subsidies. This support has made Chinese industries competitive and prepared for going the global market. The second stage of the dual circulation is internationalizing these technologies through overseas development. Belt and Road initiatives, major projects have contributed to exporting developed technologies domestically and platforms. These projects have enhanced interdependency in economy and technologies. Telecommunication and digital payment platforms are examples of China's focusing area. When China's industry is trying to go out, the standardization is key to increase dependency. Chinese industries have standardized the technology at international organizations with the support of Beijing. The success of strategic standardization enabled China to offer infrastructure with global areas. The success of the third stage is getting a return and exercising influence. China derives the return associated with technologies from widespread platforms and infrastructure. For example, the Chinese companies get the patent fee from other countries' telecom operators and manufacturers, and it benefits Chinese industries, and it will circulate domestic investment and technology developments again. The more spreading Chinese technology along with digital Silk Road, the more dependent on them. E-commerce and online payment through broadband internet access have become a part of everyday life, and it is difficult for people to abandon them. And the state infrastructure gradually lock into the Chinese product and services. And another point is China is preparing to take over the ongoing discussion on rulemaking for cyberspace. The global community started a discussion about rules in cyberspace regarding privacy, data protection, intellectual property protection, and security, along with the G20 summit of 2019 in Osaka. China established a proposal regarding a rulemaking for cyberspace governance. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a global initiative on data security in 2020. It called for taking a balanced approach to technological progress, economical development, and the protection of national security and public interests. This proposal follows China's principle on data governance and sovereignty, which are different from ongoing discussion in United Nations or G20. China now aggressively encourages that the other countries support its proposal of cyberspace governance. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has advocated for the idea of global initiative on data security in bilateral meetings since its release. Belt and Road Initiative projects are attractive wherein the government intends to use the centralized power to control its citizens with technologies. Because China applied its system to 1.3 billion people in its territory and achieved economic development with information control. So how to economic development, balancing the economic development and the technology and protecting the data is a key to next in 21st century. The sharing the data generated by the individual and companies has created a new economic value, and the economic society that information technologies created solutions to the social problems by sharing the data. big data is both an essential for infrastructure and economy. It is a driving force for technological innovation such as artificial intelligence. But there is an ongoing challenge in cybersecurity and availability of the data. My presentation showed how much impact of cyber attacks, but we have to prepare for these types of cyber attacks. In that case, the availability of the data is a key. There are challenges in the cybersecurity and the data protection. Cybersecurity services, service providers collect and store storing data from the overseas. In case of the detection of malware or the analysis of malware or the other type of prevention service for devices and cloud environment needs to collect the data, and these types of collected data should in some case transfer to the overseas, and in that time at that point cross-border data flow has become the issue with the data includes the personal information. Transferring or collected data is needed for the analysis of the cybersecurity analysis, even if it has collected, it includes the personal data. In this case, there are some different laws or regulations and guidelines in the Indo-Pacific region. Each country has a different approach, taking different approaches and deploying some kind of regulations or laws or guidelines on data protection. These types of laws have different applicability. It depends on the purpose of the use. And the requirements for the transfer may be detailed by the purpose of the use. And also it makes service providers, it makes a high cost of the service providers. Companies store data and remove the personal data in the countries where they collect the data. Sometimes it requires certification by the government or some other industrial organizations. So these types of behavior pushing the cost of the provide the cybersecurity services. So as I said, regulation on the data flow is fragmented because of it has some criteria. One is a personal or non-personal data, or it needs to cross-border data flow, or the country, whether the country or state requires a data localization or not, and what is the nature of the data for the categorized by sectors. For example, some kind of critical infrastructure needs to data in the critical infrastructure need to protect it, or the other sector it does not need a protection or not. So these types of fragmentation is occurred because of there is no standard of data protection and less interoperability. So I'd like to touch on the other countries or other areas practices. For example, European Union has cross-border data transfer regulations called General Data Protection Regulations. It also has a guidance on free flow of non-personal data, but the GDPR has a focus on the personal data. So that its data localization, and also European Union does not have the data localization regulations. It's for the data residency or localization obligations. This is the European Union's situations, and the GDPR has controlling the personal data, and it defines the regulate the data controller and data processor. Controlling the cross-border transfer of the personal data is a key of the GDPR, and GDPR requires an adequate level of protection to transfer the data. And other approaches other appropriate safeguards, or such as the European Commission's decision. It's called as a adequacy decision to the other countries. Japan and South Korea get the adequacy decision in since 2020. So in Indo-Pacific region, there is a little number of countries has that adequacy decision. Moving to the China's situation, China has deployed to the cross-border data transfer, data localization regulations in recent years. They are strictly control the personal data, and the non-personal data requires critical infrastructure information operators on data localization. And there are so many, they are setting up the new laws of the personal information protection law, or data security law, or cybersecurity law. The China's law is based on its national security perspectives. So they are saying about the personal information protection, but it's a root of their thinking is based on the national security. They regulate the information related to the identified or identifiable natural persons, and controlling processing and cross-border transfer of personal information. The third point is more. Third point is very strict point for the for transferring or the holding the data in mainland in China. Cross-border transfer or must pass a security assessment administered by the Cyberspace Administration of China and other law enforcement authorities. Data security law in China regulates a variety of data. It's related to the safeguarding of sovereignty, security, and development interest of the state. So it also regulating the critical information infrastructure's data, and it requires data localization. From the viewpoint of Indo-Pacific region, some countries are implementing its cross-border data transfer or the transfer regulations or data localization regulations, and there's a difference in regulated sector. For example, Vietnam implemented a personal data protection decree and other cross-border transfer regulations, and for the data localization, cybersecurity law and Decree 72 regulate the network service or online service providers their data. On the other hand, Thai and Singapore does not have the data localization regulations. In Indonesia, recently released some regulation regarding the cross-border data transfer and data localization. But the regulated sector is different from the Vietnam. It regulating the financial services and other government designated system providers. Now, recently, Japan is promoting setting the principle and rules for the non-personal data transfer. It's called a data-free flow with trust. A vision of trust. This is a vision of the trust and openness in the data flows. It creates the common conditions for cross data flows for non-personal data. It should be. It satisfies the domestic policy preferences and objectives. And Japan is promoting the principle for the confidence of governments to engage in the cooperative solutions and reducing the regulatory fragmentations and business uncertainty and the transaction costs. So these type of issues has I raised some issues, but Japan in trying to solve these types of issues with a data-free flow with trust. So the last point is the principle on ICT implementation. As I said, my presentation showed the Japan's approach and China's approach and the European Union's approach and the situation in Southeast Asia. So but there is no standard in some people regard it as it's some GDPR is a standard of the personal data protection, but in the region, in the Pacific region has affected by GDPR, but the GDPR is in the Pacific, there's a little countries getting the adequacy decision, and they have the same level of protection, personal data protection in this area. So there is it is far from that there is we are saying about there are some standard in this region. So we have to agree with some kind of standards and principles in ICT implementation. One thing is against for harmful use of digital technologies in our society. Some states trying to control information by censorship or some kind of filtering or some restriction on the use of the internet, or these types of practices may lead to the harmful use of technologies. But on the other hand, we can agree with the cyber attacks on critical infrastructure that should be prohibited by any actors. The other things that we can set a principle is economic prosperity. We can share the economic prosperity by maximizing the benefits of ICT with rule-based order. The third point is promoting a transparency. It's recently cyber attacks is lead to some kind of foreign interference or influences on the election process or some other political process. So we have to prevent that these kind of influence is happening. We have to secure the choice without obstacles or limits. So we need to promote the transparency with using the ICT. So I'd like to conclude my presentation. My presentation showed the growing cybersecurity instead have impacts on national security and economy. And setting a principle for the cybersecurity is Japan's approach to the Indo-Pacific region. And preventing harmful use by setting a principle is a key of the economic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moshinaga, for a very comprehensive presentation. Actually, before I turn over to my colleague Valina, I have one question for you. Now, early on in your presentation, you highlighted and Japanese efforts in this field, and some go back many years. I guess my question to you is, would you be able to elaborate a little bit on your views of the reception of the efforts that Japan has undertaken, especially in Southeast Asia, because different ASEAN member states are at very different stages of capacity and different stages of priorities. And I wonder, is the focus really on a comprehensive approach to ASEAN, or is it more on a bilateral basis where you work specifically with countries based on their specific needs? Just to get your views on that, sir.
Okay, thank you for your question. Yes, as I said, Japan has long engaged in ASEAN region, and I went to the all ASEAN countries and visited their practitioners and their technical persons and also government persons about how do they recognize the cybersecurity situations for a long time. And I understand there is a difference between the perspective and the knowledge or the practices and the operations in the ASEAN countries, between ASEAN countries. But my understanding, all countries have prioritized cybersecurity recently, because there are so many. If we have focusing on the cybersecurity, it is the opportunity of the economic development. For example, a few years ago, a central banking system was taken over by some cyber criminal actors, and they lost a huge money. it has economic issues for the ASEAN countries. So non-countries in ASEAN region has take for granted for that kind of situation. So my point is it's directly connected to this economic issue and how to secure their economic development. The cybersecurity is a very important issue for them, and Japan is now for a long time looking at the changing of the situation, and the reaction for the Japan's engagement is surely changed. Before the huge incident happening, some countries says, "Oh, information is information. But information, if we lose the information, we don't lose the money." But that kind of perception has changed. So ASEAN countries situation surely changed, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. Ladies and gentlemen, I would remind you that if you have any questions or any comments for Dai, please do plug them into the Q&A tab, and we will get to them. I think we have some time before this ends, but before that, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Falina Syed, senior analyst at ISIS, and who is an expert on these issues in her own right. Falina, you're going to respond, I guess, to some of the points that Dai brought up. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Thomas, to Dr. Dai and to the Embassy of Japan for actually bringing this conversation here, because something about the Indo-Pacific is an aspect that we actually do have to unpack on how it actually impacts Malaysia or developing countries, and also the aspects of the Indo-Pacific that actually impact cyber. So and I think a part of this would actually just be general comments about the Indo-Pacific, but I will actually deep dive into some of the questions that was actually raised by Dr. Dai. So Dr. Dai definitely laid the basis for some of the trends that we are actually seeing in the region, specifically when we're actually taking a look at the cyber incidents and how it actually impacts national security, and how some of the governments over here are actually trying to approach these issues on digital governance. So just actually deep diving into some of the aspects. So as we actually understand, there are actually various Indo-Pacific strategies that's actually going about. And I think Dr. Dai actually already stated about, say, EU, about US and Japan's Indo-Pacific strategies. And if I were to actually just unpack or box these into specific engagements in relation to cyber. So first, you might actually have economic engagements or arrangements that actually impact innovation and supply chains. So these would actually see the investments in advanced technologies, and you would actually see some of the groupings with Quad conversing on critical technologies and actually exchanging, the group of countries actually exchanging and actually deepening their knowledge in these areas. You would actually also see things like the development aid that actually happens, and that's development and capacity building. So you would actually see some infrastructure building actually happening. Also training that actually happens with under the certs. Lastly is actually value-driven cyber governance, which we would actually see for certain standard setting that actually has to occur, and that can actually be in privacy, or even say IPEF that actually tends to look at economic standards and some standards when it comes to labor and things like that. So something about the Indo-Pacific that actually looks at the various of a number of actors that actually that has introduced their own strategies or initiatives or policies or even outlooks if we're actually referring to ASEAN. So there are these numbers of strategies that's actually trying to take a look at how to handle the rise of China and how China actually, how the role China actually plays in industries. In some of these strategies, it may actually appear a little closer to containment strategies. Others would actually be something to actually develop their own domestic economies, for them to actually take a look, for them to actually try and navigate this environment while actually providing the best of transparencies. So and these Indo-Pacific strategies will actually have a host of different types of arrangements, such as Quad and IPEF, and these are tools where people, where different countries would actually be able to participate in and actually contribute in terms of like a movement that some would term as minilateralism and things like that. So this is actually just a rough idea of how I would actually take a look at the Indo-Pacific apparatus, and then actually just taking a look at the activities that's actually happening in the region. And from Dr. Dai's presentation, when he actually takes a look at Japan, and how Japan has actually engaged the region, particularly for principles or capacity building. I think the center in Bangkok is actually quite necessary when it comes to capacity building for cybercrime. And I think some of those we can actually converse about a little later on. Something that I actually also wanted to speak about is perhaps the point that's actually raised about the region. So we actually have to understand when we're actually taking a look at this region, as Thomas actually had mentioned earlier, there are a number of development levels in the region, and also the type of preferences, the type of security baggage that actually comes with how they would actually shape strategic point of views. And this, I would actually tie it to interoperability and open data flows, in the sense that when Dr. Dai actually mentioned about interoperability, we're actually thinking, okay, first you actually have to have one system that should actually be able to talk to another. But if you actually have, say, the innovation systems actually being cleaved into different directions, then how do you actually develop more technologies that are either interoperable, or will actually these two directions or tracks of innovation will just continue to develop in a bifurcated sense? So this can actually be problematic for different countries with actually different industrial bases. So you would actually have different countries being partners with both innovation types or both innovation chains. And how would you actually ensure that your industries are able to navigate well, as Dr. Dai rightly mentioned, every country actually just wants to survive and actually benefit from this economically. So they're actually trying to modernize, they're actually trying to adopt technologies, but also trying to actually do it in the best way possible for their population. So this the interoperability actually ties into the computers, but it actually takes a look at some of the open data flows that we're trying to talk about today, which somewhat, as Dr. Daichi mentioned, the trend for data localization sometimes can actually be tacked on to data sovereignty. And I think because in some of the statements say that's actually made in the UNGGE, there were concerns that jurisdiction, it's very difficult for countries to actually impose a type of jurisdiction if some of the data is actually not stored in their own servers. So the appetite and interest for data localization can actually be high, but this would actually also have to match with the type of resources that a state can actually allow, because for you to actually ensure that your data is localized, you actually need to also ensure that it's actually protected sufficiently within your own borders. So this actually goes to the state's own capacity and capability if they actually choose to take this pathway when it comes to data localization. In my view, some of the conversations about data localization and data sovereignty can actually still be quite open. So some of the aspects when we're actually taking a look at data protection, there would actually be different levels of the different classifications of data and the different types of treatments that the data actually has to receive. It doesn't mean that just because a state actually has data localization policies, it would impact all sectors. Sometimes it would actually impact certain types of sectors, certain types of data that actually has to be kept localized. But also at the same time, if the governance of data is it has several tracks, meaning that you would actually have a different type of management for data for different users, then you would actually get you may actually, and it actually functions on consent. Then if your data subject actually just gives consent, then the same type of data can actually be replicated by different people. So it doesn't really matter sometimes. So your privacy standards would actually still have to hold pretty strong if we're actually taking a look at some of the data protection levels and data localization requirements. I'm actually mentioning this because it's like, so, say a situation where you actually do have sensitive data like health related data or political opinion data actually be required to actually store locally or something like that. But then this is actually only by certain data users, and you actually have the same person actually being able to contribute this type of data in other places. You would actually find like the data can actually, the information can actually still be used by different parties, even because it's actually emitted by the same person. So this actually goes to some aspects of data management that actually can be quite cultural, and also how certain cultures view sensitive information, or because some parts of data protection is not completely inherent in every culture, and I think that's one of the aspects of harmonizing and standardizing principles that actually becomes a challenge, because as different countries actually modernize, you actually have different types of you realize that technologies are actually shaped and developed into by certain values, and there's a type of export where it actually does come to some of these values as practice. So when we're actually taking a look at privacy and how the concept of privacy may actually not be may actually have different interpretations, these would actually impact how some of the standardization and harmonization activities would occur. But it does not necessarily mean that the situation is stagnant, because as mentioned, some of the data breaches that happen when you actually do have information that's actually in public and people actually understand the value of data and how that actually works, there can actually be room or space for it to actually grow, and for a common understanding of privacy to grow. Although I would actually have to mention, actually no, I actually have a question in this area, particularly about the development of principles, or the common development of principles and culture and development levels, because if we're actually taking a look at some of the engagements, and we're actually taking a look at of the opportunities for there to actually be engagements in open data flows, or even like even when we actually talk about data localization. So as Dr. Dai actually mentioned, some recent activities when it comes to Ukraine, for instance, when you actually take a look at how attacks on critical servers would impact the ability of governments to actually produce to deliver services, because in times of adversity, you would actually still need certain services to actually be delivered via cyber means. So in this sense, there can actually be certain types of opportunities for engagements to occur if for current situations to actually shape conversations, and actually opportunities for some of the principles to actually move towards a common understanding, because I think that a lot of this is actually about trying to increase dialogue and conversations. I think something that the second part of thing that I actually would want to just touch on is about the space that the economic engagements, how that actually works with shaping principles and shaping standards. So as we actually understand, some of the digital economic activities would actually require almost like a lead shepherd when it comes to developing human capacity, and the activities that partners have to a developing nation in digital economy is actually quite priceless when it comes to building, say, AI capacity, of AI talent, or actually in building future capabilities in technologies. So in this sense, some of the while it would actually be a simplistic equation that just because you actually are a good partner in certain things, then you would actually be able to shape the principles. Some it actually does open room for different types of communication channels to occur. So this would actually be from business to business, from government to business, and that would actually open the pathway for some of the conversations, the multi-stakeholder conversations to happen. So in that sense, so the diversification of engagement channels would actually be quite necessary, I think, to actually see certain types of principles, certain types of principle developments actually being more concentrated in one area. I actually do have okay. I have two questions, I think, from some of the conversation that was held. I do apologize if I actually lost anyone actually along the way. The first one is about the innovation supply chains that we were actually taking a look at earlier, about if developed countries are actually doing enough to cultivate new technology industries in developing countries while balancing programs that deepen their own innovation chains in with specific actors. So if we actually go back to the idea that we're actually going to see a separate innovation, a bifurcated innovation chain, meaning that you would actually have most of the developing countries actually forming their own alliances to strengthen their own critical technology capabilities. It's enough actually being done to actually involve developing countries in this environment when developing countries would actually be quite nascent in some of the development, in some of the industries that they are actually building, because some of the developing countries are actually at different stages of even internet penetration and things like that. So could the countries leading in these innovation chains win developing countries over in industrial as well as value partnerships? Because if we actually look at some of the digital economy, if we actually take a look at, say, what China actually does in Malaysia, when it comes to joint ventures with joint ventures with some of the businesses or e-commerce, also infrastructure development. So some of these are actually engagement methods, and whether other partners would actually be able to offer participation in the innovation chains. I think the question that comes about the principles is the examples of engagements with the region when it comes to shaping principles. Like what type of activity has Japan actually conducted that they actually view as something that is shaping principles in the region? And this would, I think, so this is actually quite an open question, I suppose, and this is actually from your perspective to actually see how the engagement has actually been working. So I do hope that kind of makes sense. I do apologize if I actually did go off on a tangent right there. Please clarify or ask me if I actually said anything weird. Thank you.
Thanks, Falina. Actually, before I invite Dr. Dai to respond, we have a question from someone in the audience. I think, Falina, this might be more for you, but I'm going to read it out nonetheless. I'm going to summarize it. So after Dr. Dai responds, then perhaps, Falina, you could come in on this. So our colleague Jamil from ISIS, he spoke, his question essentially centers on how, SMEs are the backbone in many economies in Southeast Asia, and many also believe they are unlikely to become the victims of cyber attacks due to their small business nature. However, in Malaysia, 84% of SMEs experience cyber threat incidents, and 76% have suffered more than one threat, and overall it has caused significant harm, with losses estimated to be up over 50 billion ringgit. So the question is, how can ASEAN governments encourage or subsidize or ramp up self-protection, and what best practices would suit this region? I guess this is a question mainly for you, Falina, but Dai, if you want to jump in on this as well, you're more than welcome to. And I turn over the floor to you first to respond to the points that Falina brought up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question, and thank you for comment for Falina. And first I'd like to answer the Jamil question. Yes, I went to some countries in ASEAN. The small medium enterprises are also the issue, and also it is the same situation happening in Japan. Small medium enterprises in Japan does not believe they will be victims, because they don't use the some companies executives I talked to, he said we are using computers, but it disconnected from the internet, so I don't have to take care of these types of issues. Oh, okay, it's 20 years ago. That recognition is 20 years ago. Recently, if you received a file from other people, if you received from the file from the other files through the USB drives or some other types of devices, it comes to your system. In fact, it leads to the infection of the malwares. So, for example, some malwares is infected to the USB drives and transferred to the other types of computers and searching their victims. That type of situation is happening over 20 or 10 or 15 years. So I think the small medium perception in the recognition, first things how ASEAN small medium enterprises going to get more protected is recognize they are already becoming the victims. Already they are victims, and they doesn't know they are victims. So the first things governments encourage the people in these countries is they are victims. They make sure they are victims, and there is a huge economic losses for their businesses and lead to the country's economic growth. So the government, I know the government trying to encourage the people, and it does not fully successful. But the keeping people to talking about that situation, it changed the situation. Actually, Japan has changed recently, especially during the COVID crisis. They know about they are the part of victims. For example, they infected the ransomware and they stopped their operation. They are actually a victim, and the medias of the news is saying about the victims of that kind of cyber attacks. So keep telling the people about they are victims is a key to the more keeping up their security. This is first of my question, and I'd like to say comment about Parina's comment about the when the countries in the ASEAN region value the partnership. It's a very it's a very key for the how can we collectively react to the current situation, not only the cybersecurity issues, but also you said about the containment strategy taken by the other countries. But I must stress about the Japan's approach. Japan does not pursue the taking a containment strategy or the other type of blockades. Japan is pursuing setting a principle and not setting the principle, and some states want to pursuing the it's a state practice trying to get more originally conducting some kind of practices, but it follows the principle. For example, not to intervene other countries' political independence or something like that, or highly does not attack the critical infrastructure or the related systems. That is a basic principle. Setting a basic principle is a key. Is when the for the Japan's approach, and when value partnership, that partnership it's now. I think this is now, because the now political tension between China and the United States has recognized that some countries recognize that we have to choose the side. It's not a question, but we have to set the principle and follow that principle and share the economic prosperity is the key. So we have to move now. When the answer for the when we value the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zai. That's a very comprehensive response. Valina, if you can respond to Jamil's point and perhaps share your point of view.
Thank you so much. And I actually definitely take the point of Dr. Dai on the various approaches that different countries would actually have to take in order to try and navigate the future 21st century digital environment. So, and I thank you so much for the response. I think just to take a look at Jamil's question and some of the issues that's actually happening in the region, I think this goes back to some of the things we actually touched on with the basic issue when it comes to developing principles for some of the countries that may actually not know the value of data, or they may actually not know if the data is if they've actually suffer either cyber attacks, what would actually be impacted, because if you actually mentioned earlier, 51 billion collectively, over 84% of the SMEs, that's actually quite a number. I mean, it's like an SME would actually, they are small and medium business enterprises. I think some of this actually can go to regulations. It can also go into data management practices. So some part of a data management practice, if you actually say pursuing your certification, so some of the gold standards of certification when it comes to cybersecurity, you're actually looking at your ISOs. Those can actually be really pricey. And if you're an SME, how do you actually follow those type of how do you actually introduce yourself or normalize your own mindset to those type of ideas when it's actually quite expensive for you to actually go through, say, the whole course, or to actually ensure that you would be able to practice it to that level. So I think in some parts of ASEAN, they're actually trying to make these type of processes cheaper or actually more approachable. You actually do need your public awareness arms of your government agencies that's involved in these areas, like those in digital economy, those in cybersecurity, to actually contribute to some of the awareness building. So awareness building is like almost half of the battle, because if you actually look at cybersecurity being a whole of society issue, some of the biggest issues in data breaches actually come from people who actually click the wrong link, or people who actually go into the wrong portal, or people who have actually accidentally opened themselves to some of these vulnerabilities. So these are actually some areas that can be solved and avoided if there's actually greater awareness in society. But you actually do need an arm in your government who would actually be able to effectively contribute to this, instead of actually having piecemeal arms, meaning that, okay, this government agency actually does like this campaign once and then that's it. No, it actually has to be a bit more sustained, because knowledge actually has to be something that's actually kind of like drummed into human beings. So the second part of it would actually concern, I think, the general regulations and the awareness when it comes to the idea goes back to, okay, how do people actually know the value of their data? When you actually have notifications about data breaches, for instance, is this considered something that would impact negatively the view of people would actually become a bit more scared that you actually have a lot of these data breaches happening, or would it actually create a type of deterrent value? And I think this actually, when you're actually looking at general regulations for data privacy, the aspect about deterrence in terms of like publicity for some of these data breaches actually has to happen. There should be a bit more I think the cost of investigations for some of these data breaches also actually have to be discussed. So for instance, if you actually have going back to the idea of how did the initial incident actually happen? Was it actually because of a highly motivated actor, or was it actually because of certain types of negligence by the user? So these are actually two different scenarios, because it actually involves two different types of processes. So having the investigations actually being a bit more transparent should actually help build awareness on where the vulnerabilities are. I think the whole point is to actually ensure that society would actually be interested in managing their data responsibly. And even if they're managing the data of other people, they should actually be even more interested in actually managing themselves. So that's some views that I would actually have. So going back to Thomas.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Falina. Folks, we've actually exceeded the time of the webinar, but I'm going to give Dai the last word here. If there is anything in particular you want to add or to conclude on, Dai, I turn over to you before we draw this to a close.
Thank you. I would like a quick comment about the awareness building. The awareness building is very key for the cybersecurity or cybersecurity. So because the for a long time I worked on the how can we build up the awareness. Well, it's a long way to go. However, it has a steady progress in this decade. So we have to keep on this building awareness. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that draws our webinar to a close today. Before I leave, let me make two administrative announcements. First, the recording of this webinar will be made available at the event microsite in early December. And I do believe that after Dai reviews his PowerPoint presentation, he might share that with us for us to upload as well. With that, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to thank our two discussants, Dr. Dai Mochinaga and Ms. Farlina Syed from ISIS. And our thanks also to His Excellency the Ambassador and our colleagues from the Embassy of Japan for partnering with us in today's webinar. As you leave and exit the webinar, there will be a very short survey for you to answer. We hope that you take that up. Thank you very much, everyone. Dai, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.